All right, we are live. Hello, my name is Patrick Rollins, and I love helping out the marketing and sales process here at Paid Memberships Pro. You've probably seen me do some other webinars in the past, or you've probably read some of the newsletters I send out. I love doing this type of stuff. While I've been here at Paid Memberships Pro over the last year and a half, I've done research on our users, including sending out surveys, doing user interviews. And one of the challenges that our users run into, people watching this, is some of the legal stuff. So today we're going to talk about things like taxes, intellectual property, when you should create an LLC. We've got a whole bunch of legal questions that I don't personally feel confident giving you answers. I can tell you what I've heard, but I'm not a legal expert. So I met Sam at a conference earlier this year, and I was ecstatic. It's clear she loves entrepreneurship. She used to work at law firms, and now she is an attorney turned entrepreneur who helps small businesses legally grow and protect their online brands. She's a podcast, she's an ultimate bundle, and she has tons of advice. So I know we're all just kind of coming into the webinar here, but please welcome Sam Vanderwielen. Sam, why don't you take it away? Oh, sorry, last thing. There will be Q&A at the end. So for all the people, please put your questions into YouTube, into the comments. I can go ahead and pull them up on the screen at the end. So if you have questions, we literally have a legal expert with us here today to answer some of your questions. So please go ahead and Sam, what's happening? What are you going to cover today?
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk to everybody about just kind of getting our legal foundation set for our businesses, whether you're already up and running or you're thinking about getting something up and running. I just kind of want you to have options and understand what the game plan is. So I'm really excited to get into it. But we'll talk about registering your businesses today. We can talk about protecting your intellectual property, sending contracts, or like having people agree to things when they're purchasing stuff from your site, all kinds of stuff.
Awesome. Well, take it away.
All right. So, welcome to Legal Steps to Take When Starting Your Online Business. Like Patrick mentioned, I'm Sam Vanderwielen. I'm an attorney turned entrepreneur who helps online business owners, course creators legally protect and grow their online businesses. And I try not to make it too stressful. So just to get started, a little bit of housekeeping here. You can always pop your questions in the chat, like Patrick mentioned, so that I can answer them at the end. And then also, I would love for you to say hi and give us all a shout out that you were here today. So I'm on Instagram probably most often, and you can tag me at Sam Vanderwielen. So I always start out today's training with practicing what I preach and really showing you what it looks like to legally protect yourself and your business and your content in real life, because a lot of times we have all the formal stuff, or we can focus on a lot of the formal things like registering our businesses and having the right contracts. But part of being a business owner, especially in the online space, is knowing also how to talk about what you do and properly protect yourself. So I always say there's like an informal way to legally protect yourself, and then there's the formal stuff. We're going to be talking about a lot of the formal stuff today, like the LLC stuff, right? But with the informal stuff, it's just as important. So I always show you a little example of what this looks like in practice. Maybe you're going to be giving a training, or you're doing a YouTube video, or you're going to start a podcast, and you're going to be talking about some content, that whatever it is that you teach people or you offer. And you probably want to offer some sort of disclaimer depending on what you teach. So I always just say to everyone, like, I'm an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice. This workshop is informational and educational only. And so I just think that's like a good reminder, but I also keep it here so that it serves as a good example. All right, so let's go over what you'll learn today. I want to get into, I think there are 5 things total. So number 1, we will cover how to form your business. That includes what LLCs are and what the difference is between LLCs and sole proprietorships, and some of the basic steps around how you do that. We'll also talk about business insurance and how it financially protects your business. We'll talk about contracts as well, and what kinds of contracts you would need depending on what you're offering in your business. And then we'll go over intellectual property basics. So we'll talk about, really what the difference is between a copyright and a trademark. Both are really important for membership sites, especially for anyone selling any sort of like month-to-month services or something like that. We'll wrap up with a Q&A, and then I'll share a little bit at the end too about if you want to learn more about pretty much anything that we talked about today. I have more resources for you, both free and paid resources for whatever you need. Like Patrick mentioned, I have a podcast and all that fun stuff, so I'll share that at the end. So I'm Sam Vander Wielen. Anybody I haven't met more formally before today, I'm an attorney turned entrepreneur. So yes, I was a lawyer. People ask me that all the time. I was a corporate litigator for about 5 years. That means I argued cases in court in front of judges. It was really scary, and I didn't like it. It was not for me, not because of being in front of judges actually, but I just hated the way that like you work as a traditional lawyer. And so back in 2016, I actually left the law, I left corporate law behind, and I started my own health coaching business. But when I started that business, it was not exactly what I thought either. So as much as I really set out to help other people learn how to cook, because that's what I really like to do, apparently the universe had other plans for me, because my online phone rang off the hook instead with basically all the questions we're going to go over today, like what's an LLC and do I need one, and which contract do I need for my business? But nobody was writing to me asking me like, what kind of health coaching do you offer? It's just not how it turned out. So in 2017, I shifted gears and I started my health coaching, or I shut down my health coaching business, and I started Sam Vander Wielen LLC, the business that you see today, to help people learn how to legally protect their businesses. And so over the past 5 years, I cannot believe it, but I have been very fortunate to help over 40,000 online coaches, course creators, and service providers learn how to get paid, get legit contracts in place, form their businesses, and especially, I feel like more recently, helping so many people protect their content from online copycats. So I have been fortunate to be featured around the internet a few different places, but maybe you've run into me in one of these, and now we'll have to add Paid Memberships Pro to this as well. But I've been fortunate to be able to go around and help people learn how to do this stuff, because it is very, very confusing and it's overwhelming. So if you felt like that before, you are definitely in the right place today. All right, let's hop in to number one. Let's talk about forming your business. So before we really get into the nitty gritty of forming your business, I think it's important whenever you're doing anything in life in general. I just think it's really helpful to understand, what the goal is, what's the desired outcome, because otherwise you set out to do stuff that's not, not even tenable. So with legally protecting your business, I think it's important to know that the US legal system is a little crazy. Here in America, we can sue anybody for pretty much anything, even if you sign something saying that you can't, right? And so a lot of people will say, well, what's the point of legally protecting my business then? Or they think, well, the only point of legally protecting your business is when you're just trying to block people from suing you. Meanwhile, that's not even, an option for us. And so then they'll think that they can wait until their businesses get a little bit bigger to do anything about it. So let's go over to talk about what are the points of actually protecting yourself then, right? So for one, you maintain healthy boundaries. One thing that's really important as you build your business is that you might have the time now to deal with individual customers asking you questions or something like this. You're not going to have time for that as your business grows. And something that I feel really passionately about is helping people start to become the business that they want to be. Start acting like the business that you're kind of already headed towards, instead of acting like the business that you have now. So maybe now you could field a bunch of different individuals' questions about like your return policy or your cancellation policy or something like that. But the idea is that for the kind of business that you're building, the volume is going to be so high that you won't be able to sustain that. And so I really believe in kind of shifting into that thought process and using legal stuff like contracts at checkout, for example, to protect you and keep your boundaries a little bit more streamlined, to not have to answer individual questions or like be the judge and jury of every individual's request for you. Now, there are also practical benefits to getting legal stuff in place for your business. So you can actually get paid, because if you don't have any agreement saying otherwise, then somebody would just be able to say that they don't owe you money or that they're allowed to cancel their membership or whatever. You can also protect your content through a lot of the legal steps that we're going to talk about today. And you might not be able to block or prevent people from suing you, but you can win or dismiss a lawsuit if they do, right? So that's really important. So it's not like so black or white. It's not either that you get sued or don't get sued. You can't really control it, but we can put you in a really good spot. And last but not least, you can also control the costs and damages of a lawsuit. A lot of people don't know that. So you might not have any sort of like legal mechanism to block people from suing you in America, but you can block people for suing you for a lot of different things. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so with that, then understanding kind of like what our goals are really here, we understand more that the goal with legally protecting your business is that we're trying to do as much as we possibly can, right? And understanding what our limits are. And so the first of those, goals is to form our business, because with forming our business, we protect ourselves personally. So I want you to kind of like at the end of today, you'll be able, I think, to step back and see how there are different aspects of protecting yourself. There's protecting yourself personally, there's protecting your business's money, and then your boundaries. So with step one, we're going to go into talking now about forming your business to protect yourself. So here in America, we form our businesses by registering our businesses in our state, typically where we live and work, right? Some people will try to go down the path of like registering a business in a state that they don't live in. But when you really like think about it, at the end of the day, you have to pay taxes where you live. And if you're running your business out of a different state, then your business really should be registered there. So at least from my perspective, I don't necessarily teach people how to register their businesses in other states. Most people just register their businesses where they are. I would say that you could explore that down the line if your business got really big. Okay, so from there, when we register in our state, you do so by choosing your entity type first. So essentially, when you go to your states, like I would Google, California business registration or Colorado business registration, and you would only go to the website that comes up for your actual state. What I would first encourage you to do is to get familiar with what kinds of entities are available in your state. So your state probably has a sole proprietorship, an LLC, corporation, partnership. There are all these different kinds of things, right? In some states, they don't require any sort of registration for sole proprietorship, others do. So it kind of depends. So the first thing I recommend is that you just get familiar with what these options are in your state and what some of the pros and cons are of them in your state too. Now, what typically happens is that when you look that up, the first two options that become like the most viable for you are an LLC or a sole proprietorship. Those are the two most common paths that business owners go down when registering their businesses. And so we're going to spend our time today now breaking these down. So let's break these down a little bit further. So sole proprietorship is the most basic type of business entity. It's just a business entity type, right? So that's all that is. So it's just like when you're registering your business, you're just choosing what kind of business you're registering as, right? And sole proprietorship is just one of those options of the many that I just listed. So with a sole proprietorship, some states, like I said, don't even require registration, but many do, right? And some don't require registration for your sole proprietorship, but if you want to go by a name that's different than what you're going as like in your marketing, we'll talk about these in a second. They're called DBAs. You might have heard of them. Then some states will require that you register the DBA, but you don't have to register as a sole proprietorship. So it's a little confusing. Some of these states make it a little hard for us to teach this, but in general, I just want you to know that a sole proprietorship is the most basic kind of entry level way of registering your business. But the big con that you need to know about is that there is absolutely no legal protection for you personally if you register your business as a sole proprietorship. So if you remember a minute ago, I said the point of registering our businesses is to personally protect ourselves. But if you register your business as a sole proprietorship, we are not protecting ourselves. Really, the only thing that you're doing is you're getting to say you've registered a business, right? That's helpful. And then it helps you to be able to capture business expenses. So that's helpful come tax time, but it's not helpful for the fact that the purpose really of registering your business, besides capturing those business expenses, really should be to personally protect yourself and kind of wall yourself off. So that's sole proprietorship. Let's go to talking about LLCs. So with LLCs in some states, it's a pretty basic setup, right? It's actually not very hard in most places to register an LLC. In some states, other states, it can be a little bit more complicated, right? Even like I just moved from outside of Philadelphia to New York, and the actual LLC registration process itself in New York is really straightforward. Where they get really wacky is that they have a newspaper publication requirement where when you register your LLC, you have to run an ad in a local newspaper. It can be like a small town newspaper that runs for, I believe it's 6 weeks. And that's where it gets a little weird because you have to go and take out this ad and kind of navigate that process. So if your state has some kind of rule like that, there are plenty of different states that have additional, financial requirements. Like in California, they have something called the franchise tax. And so it's just kind of state to state dependent, but I would say on the whole, most states are really straightforward, and I don't find it to be that hard. With an LLC, it's a very similar setup process to a sole proprietorship in that, like, it's an online form, you're filling out this form, you're paying some fee. Some states have like a second step form once you get the first step, approved or something like that, but every state's a little bit different, but it doesn't tend to be that bad. The big benefit, though, to the LLC is that it does provide you with what's called limited personal liability protection. So unlike the sole proprietorship, which gives you literally no legal protection at all for you as a person, with an LLC, you get what's called limited personal liability protection. What does that mean? So that means that essentially, I want you to think of like your business is this thing. It's this like kind of distinct entity over here. And then you're a person over here, right? And the LLC kind of builds this wall, this like invisible wall between the two of you and keeps you nice and safe and protected so that if your business got sued, there's like an impenetrable wall here that you can't be blamed for. You can't be liable for what happens as a result of your business. That's really what we want for you at the end of the day, because we don't want you to be personally liable for the actions of your business. If you're personally liable for the actions of your business, then that means you're financially liable for what happens, right? So we do not want that for you. That's why LLCs are so popular, especially over sole proprietorships. And we can talk a little bit about that in the Q&A if anybody has questions about whether or not it's right for you. But the one big like myth I wanted to dispel before we hop into the next thing is that a lot of people think that there's like this kind of like mythical, LLC tax or something like that. But really, you are actually taxed the same exact way as what's called a single member LLC owner. So when you just form an LLC by yourself, you don't have any co-owners of the business or anything like that, you are taxed the same way as a sole proprietor would be, right? It doesn't change. The taxes don't change until you become an S Corp. So that is just a tax filing status. It's not a different kind of business entity in this case. And you would know it if you did become it because it's very, very complicated. And when you do become an S Corp, you're actually saving on taxes. And that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But the point that I just wanted to make was that you're not taxed any differently as an LLC. So that is not part of the consideration that you should be making when deciding, should I be an LLC or should I be a sole proprietor? You're going to pay the same in taxes. It's really deciding between these, the difference in the legal protection and whether or not you can swing the fees in your state for either one. I always just quickly mention, most places don't have this, but it is helpful to check to see if you have any requirements for your county and your city for any local registration requirements. Really, the only time I see this is typically when people have things in person. So if you do anything with people in person, or you have a place of business, right? Any sort of like storefront. But usually with digital storefronts, we don't see this, but it's just something I would spend no more than 5 minutes, just quick call and make sure, say I don't, if you don't see clients in person or you sell only digital products, I would just call, say, hey, I have a website, I sell this stuff online, my business is based in Austin, Texas, or whatever. Is there any sort of registration requirement? If they say no, then just go on with it. Yep. Okay, so let's talk next steps. So if we form our LLCs or we form a sole proprietorship, whatever decision you decide to make, what are some of the next things that you might have to tackle as a business owner? So the first thing would be a DBA name. That's what I mentioned earlier. It's otherwise known as a trade name or a fictitious name. Every state calls it something different. I wish every state could get on board and just call everything the same, because that would make our lives a lot easier. But DBA stands for doing business as. So when you see a company that goes like in their marketing as a name that's different than whatever their legal entity name is, they have to have what's called a DBA or trade name registered in their state that sort of legally attaches that name to the company's corporate name. So the example I like to give is Target, because Target Brands Inc. is the name of like the legal entity name, right? That's the corporation name that they've registered with the states where they're located and wherever they're formed and all that kind of stuff, probably Delaware. And then what they do is, because, you know, when you go to the store, when you go to Target, or you get your receipt at Target, you don't see Target Brands Inc. or anything like that on the side of the building or on the receipt. What you see is Target. So they have to have a DBA that legally attaches that name, Target, to Target Brands Inc. It's essentially like a formal way of saying, hey, these two things are related, so that you can get the protection of your LLC, for example, from using the more catchy, you know, marketing name. So otherwise, if you just started going by a different name and you never registered an LLC, or you never registered a DBA to attach it to your LLC, the concern would be that people don't know that you're a business and they don't know that you have an LLC, and so therefore you don't get the protection from it. So that's why we register a DBA. The next thing we would want to do is get you a business bank account. This is something that's very easy to set up, very fast, should be free. I really recommend finding a bank near you that will offer you a free business bank account. I would make sure that it's, you know, like no fees, no minimums if you could, anything like that. They're always available. So I would shop around until you actually found it, because it's not worth settling for paying any fees. Really, the point with this is, like, you know, ideally I would love for you to have an actual business bank account, which is just a same normal checking and savings account that's just labeled as a business account. If for whatever reason you can't find one that's not labeled as that, just have a separate bank account than your personal. Really, the point here is to not commingle any of your business's money with anything that's yours personally. So we want, like, anything that you get paid in your business to be going into this business bank account, and anything that you're spending on your business's like expenses or buying equipment should be coming out of this bank account. So your personal money shouldn't be flowing in and out. It shouldn't be commingled, you know, with your Target run right above like something that you bought for your business. It should just be just your business stuff, and that's where all your business's revenue should go as well. Okay, next up, we just quickly take that business bank account once you get it set up, and I want you to connect it to a business version of whatever payment gateway you want to use, like PayPal or Stripe. You want to set up a PayPal business account or a Stripe business account, and you just attach that business bank account to it, so that, you know, let's say you're making sales and they're being processed through PayPal, then the money will just get automatically transferred to your business bank account. Really simple. I always recommend getting an accountant as early as you can, right? So a lot of accountants will offer, you know, their yearly tax prep services, but throughout the year they'll communicate with you. So what I always recommend to my customers is finding, again, shopping around for an accountant who will do that, right? Somebody who does offer that as part of their services. But the earlier you can get an accountant, the better. We want to remember to pay our taxes. That's very important. So, as a business, we have to pay federal taxes and we have to pay state taxes. We pay quarterly, what are called quarterly estimated taxes every quarter, so 4 times a year. We pay estimated taxes based on what we think we're going to owe, based on what we think we're making every quarter, right? So we have to pay taxes based on this. And we have to remember as well that what we are taxed on as business owners is the profit of our business. So if your business generates $100,000 in revenue, but then you have $60,000 in expenses, and legitimate business expenses that are actually qualified, you know, under the IRS's guidelines, then we are taxed on that remaining $40,000. So that remaining $40,000 is what appears on our personal income tax return, and that's what we're taxed on. So It's very important that we keep that in mind, especially as LLC owners. Before you become an S corp, if you just have a regular LLC, you do not get to count the amount that you pay yourself as a business deduction. So you have to keep that in mind when thinking about how much am I going to owe in taxes and how much should I set aside. The other things that you pay for, tools like online business tools to help run your business and all that kind of stuff, buying pro memberships, that all counts as a business expense, but paying yourself does not. So the typical rule of thumb is to set aside about 30% of your revenue overall, just to be very conservative, and that should leave you with a cushion to be able to pay your taxes. Really, my goal is just for you not to have a big surprise at the end of the year and not have kept enough money in your business bank account to pay your taxes. And paying your taxes does count as a business expense, so that's the upside. Last but not least, we have renewals. So whenever you form your business, typically there's an annual or maybe every other year renewal process that you'll have to quickly fill out a form, say you're still in business, usually pay some sort of renewal fee. It's much, much lower than the initial registration fee, but it's just something to keep in mind for in case you move or something like that. You always want to keep your contact information up to date so that your renewal doesn't slip through the cracks. Okay, let's talk then about business insurance, because with business insurance, this is how we financially protect our business. So with our LLCs, we're talking about protecting ourselves personally, right? And obviously that's very important, but we also want to protect our business's money, because even if you're not personally liable for what happens in your business, we don't want your business to be financially liable for what happens either, because any normal lawsuit could be pretty crushing to a small business. So let's hop in and talk a little bit more about what business insurance really is. There are many, many different types of business insurance, but the general, I'll break down a few, but the general gist of it, of what I want you to know about it, is that it financially protects your business. So it does this by paying for your lawyer and also paying for any judgment or settlement that's found against your business. So, for example, if somebody bought your membership and then they implemented something from your membership and it didn't go well for them, they like lost money or they got sick or they got injured, right? Then and they sued you. What you would do if you had business insurance is that anything you got from like a lawyer, if you actually got sued, even if you just got a nasty letter from that person's lawyer, you would take this letter or take the lawsuit and you would turn it over to your business insurance company and you would submit it, to be covered. And in doing so, they would provide you with a defense attorney, and then they would pay that attorney's hourly fee, which is huge, trust me. And then let's say you guys settled this case for like $10,000, because pretty much every case settles in America. So let's say they settled on your behalf for $10,000. They would pay that out of your policy. Now, of course, we always have to know what your deductible is. That's a really big key for business insurance, because the deductible is what you're going to be responsible for. So I always recommend that if you already have business insurance, you should know this. You have to check out what yours is. If you're shopping for it after this, then that's one of the most important things to ask about, is to find out what is your deductible, because that's what you're going to be on the hook for. So is that going to be like a $10,000 deductible? Is it a $5,000, $1,000, $500? Whatever it is, it's really up to you, right? It's just that you have to understand what the risk is, essentially, of having that kind of a deductible. Is it going to, is it something that you could actually pay if it happened? It's just like normal insurance. The higher the deductible that you have, the cheaper your business insurance should be. So it's something that, if you can swing a really high deductible, then that's great. It'll make it a little bit more affordable for you. But typically, we keep them pretty low so that you can actually afford it if it happens. You'll also look at your policy limits and what's covered. So for policy limits, that's what tells you how much your business insurance company will pay up to. So if they say that your policy limit is $1 million, then they would pay up to $1 million worth of this judgment or settlement that's found against you. $1 million, then $10 million in the aggregate is pretty normal in like the online business industry, course industry, unless you have a really high, volume of clients or something like that. But that's pretty typical. And then last but not least, you just always want to know what's covered, right? Just like any other kind of insurance, it's like you want to make sure that you'd actually be covered for the kind of services you're doing or the kinds of products that you're selling. So you want to make sure that that's covered by your business insurance policy. Okay, I hope this is helpful so far. I wanted to give everybody a sec to catch up, take a water break for a second. Hmm. I hope that it's been helpful to learn about the difference between LLCs and sole props. But otherwise, we can move on, and I'm looking forward to what your questions are. So make sure you pop them in the chat, or we can keep them for the end, whatever works for you. Okay, so I think that then always like the best next step is talking about contracts, because we've talked about how to personally kind of insulate you and protect you based on how you register your business. Then with business insurance, we talk about registering or about protecting your business's money, right? But with contracts, I really think of it as kind of protecting your day-to-day sanity. So with contracts, we use contracts to protect your boundaries and also to act as the proof that you're going to need to do any of the things that we just talked about successfully. So let's talk about contracts. So really the goal with contracts is to get it in writing, right? We have to get stuff in writing. I know sometimes people think like you can have an email or a DM or some other kind of like message of some sort. I always say like carrier pigeon. So we can't do that when it comes to contracts in our businesses. So here's how contracts sort of work. First things first, I think that contracts protect our boundaries because, as I mentioned earlier, contracts are what you're going to need to establish some of your business's policies, especially when you're selling things like memberships where people can join anytime, right? People can come on board. You need to have something that's in place that people are agreeing to as they're coming in. And this is where we're going to start establishing our boundaries on like refund policies and access and use of our information, use of our intellectual property. So the contract is really where you're going to lay all those boundaries out. But it's also going to act as the proof that you need really at the end of the day. So contracts also have a very, practical application that if someone, let's say, stops paying you on time, right? Like they're supposed to have canceled 30 days in advance or something and they didn't, but they still accessed. And so you're owed money. If they say, oh, well, I'm just not paying or I don't owe it, if you didn't have a contract in place, you would have no way of going and enforcing this payment for them, right? And if you offer any sorts of services or you do any coaching or something like that, you're absolutely going to need this to protect yourself as well, for acting as proof that you have advised them on what like you do and don't do, kinds of services you offer, how and when you're to be paid, all of that kind of stuff. So the contract's going to be the proof that you absolutely need. For memberships, we ideally want to have some sort of contract at checkout. So ideally, it would be like whatever your onboarding process looks like as somebody is coming into your membership, you would have someone agree to what I call at least terms of use. So the terms of use is essentially a contract, but instead of getting people to sign it or like e-sign it, instead we have them agree to it. And so you can do this by popping something in at checkout and having somebody check off a box or choose from a drop-down menu or something like that. Some sort of what we call an affirmative action that they have to take to say like, yes, I saw this. Yes, I reviewed this. You've all agreed to these, a million times before in your life. But that's really the ideal, is that we would have this terms of use at checkout somewhere. And in it, we would establish that you're the owner of the intellectual property inside of it. We would set out all of your policies. So your refund, return policy, that kind of stuff would be set out. The access about like what will you do if you find out they shared their login information with somebody else. You could also put in there any disclaimers of liability so that you're not responsible for what happens as a result of implementing your information. All that kind of stuff will go in this contract. Now, ideally, we would have this professionally drafted. That's always the goal. Because a lot of times what happens with, the free stuff that you tend to see is pretty bare bones. And also the ones that tend to be provided by like other platforms or something like that, they just tend to be, they're not custom for your business. So the ideal situation would just be that you would have something that is professionally drafted for you. You also want to make sure with contracts that they are clear, consistent, and easy to explain. So more important than anything with a contract is that they are very clear. It's not wishy-washy. It's also not contradictory. And that's another thing that I see when people try to put together their own contracts, is that they tend to take a little bit of the kitchen sink approach and they put everything in. And in doing so, they just have a little bit too much of contradictory information or a little bit confusing. I think lawyers have made this like really complicated by, we write in a certain way, we write really fancy sounding contracts and stuff like that. So then people think that contracts have to sound that way. They don't have to sound that way. That's not what makes a contract a legitimate contract. Something that's clear and consistent and easy to explain is just as enforceable as something that sounds like hundreds of year old, English or something like this. So that has nothing to do with it. Last but not least, with contracts, it's just as important that you send and sign them correctly as it is that you have a legitimate contract. So something that I see a lot is that people get a really good contract, but then they don't send or sign it correctly, which makes it unenforceable. So if you were selling a membership, for example, it would have to be included at the time, around the time that somebody pays you, right? We can't withhold it until after somebody pays you in order to make it enforceable. So that would be at least part of the consideration that I would make when sort of setting up your tech stack and deciding how you're going to allow people to purchase. And then for signing, e-signing is totally fine. If you're sending a contract more for like services or something like that, some other part of your business, then e-signing is okay, but you have to use what's called an e-sign act compliant platform, something like HelloSign, Adobe Sign, like all of those kinds of companies, they're all e-sign act compliant. You just wouldn't want to have somebody like randomly signing the like in a Word document or something like that. So that's what's really important there. And then for sending, obviously, when you're doing like a membership or something like that, then we're just talking about including something at checkout. Okay, so I'll let you pop in any contrast questions that you have, but I know we're gonna take them all at the end.
Yeah. Well, this is Sam. I'll pop in for a second.
Yeah.
We actually do have one, so I'll
Oh,
put
good.
this on screen. And Bruce asked, "Will you be covering terms and conditions and privacy policy?" So let me rephrase this a little bit. I guess when it comes to like things like privacy policies, what type of stuff does like a membership site need to put in there? Do you need to, do you need to put in like? I think sometimes some stuff I've read is like you need to share every service that you share your data with. So let's say I use MailChimp or ConvertKit, do I need to say in my privacy policy, if you opt in for our newsletter, you will be sharing your email address with these companies? Do I need to list every single company? That seems like a lot.
Yeah, it seems like a lot, right? I think, I always say there's like lawyer Sam and then normal Sam. So like lawyer Sam would probably say, yeah, sure, I think you probably do, because that's probably what the law requires us. But I think that what typically the law requires us is really like the main parts of like whoever's processing the data. So I would say like if you were using a like MailChimp, ConvertKit situation, I would put that in there because that's going to be the bulk of where, you're taking people's email addresses for your site and you're sending them to ConvertKit. You may be connecting it to something else to process people's data. And like, I think if you can list it, but otherwise I don't think that's the end of the world. I think they're mostly concerned about like the big companies that could be, not only processing their data but selling it as well. So
Yes.
I would say to anybody who's using Facebook ads like myself, I definitely make sure that I list Facebook ads, because I know for sure that they're taking people's information and then there's using it in other ways. So like that's kind of what sticks out to me. This is also why I recommend to customers that about once or twice a year you check in on these policies that you've drafted and you revisit them to see like, have you added something to your tech stack where you're now sharing data with some other company that you weren't using the last time. So that's one. And for Bruce too, so terms and conditions and privacy policies are two of the three website policies that I typically recommend, the third being a website disclaimer. So with the privacy policy, really the goal, like Patrick mentioned, with the privacy policy is letting people have more, transparency and awareness around how we're using their personal information. So the goal of a privacy policy is really to tell somebody where and when and how you're collecting their information and why. What are you doing with it? So what are you collecting this information to do? And yes, that's part of where it comes into saying like, I collect it to send it to my email service like ConvertKit or MailChimp or something. And so that's part of it. But we also have to let people know like what kinds of safety precautions we take with their information. Do we have any sorts of like safety practices on our own websites built in, any malware, these kinds of things. So we let people know that in the privacy policy. And I always say like a fail safe method too is to let people know in your privacy policy how to contact you to change their information or to have it deleted, because that's really what will prevent a lot of problems is when somebody thinks like they can't get you to, like, they've tried unsubscribing from your emails but they can't get it to stop or something like that. You
Mhm.
want to give them a very easy way to get in touch with you so that if all else fails, they'll hopefully reach out to you and just ask, or they might say something mean, but you could at least take them off of your email list or something like that. But those are both templates that I do offer, by the way, just in case this is not something you feel like drafting yourself, Bruce.
Well, it's funny, Sam. I was going to save this for the end, but does Sam write these as a service? So you've already answered the next question. Well done. There are a couple more here, but I think I will
Yeah.
save them for the end. But let me just answer this one quickly. So Emily, yes, this is recorded and it will be on the Paid Memberships Pro website. So if you want to watch this when it's all done, if you want to go back and take some notes or something, it will be on the Paid Memberships Pro website. It's the same page that you registered on. So it's that we'll post the video there, and usually a couple of weeks later we'll post sort of like an outline of what we discussed. So it should all be there. Okay, Sam, feel free to keep going.
Okay, cool. Let's move on then. Okay, so we also want to talk about protecting your intellectual property, because with protecting your intellectual property, that's how we're going to keep our content safe. Because you can register your business, you can get contracts in place, you can do all of these things, but at the end of the day, if we don't do certain things to protect our intellectual property, then we're really putting ourselves in or at least our content in harm's way. So let's talk about that. So, how do we then keep our content safe? First thing first, I think it's really important to understand what falls under copyright and what falls under trademark. So you might have wondered this in the past. I feel like this is a question that I get a lot. So with copyright, it's typically more like content, right? So it's literary works, books, poems, lyrics, songs, things like that tend to fall under copyright. Oh, and as well as video, so like video content, audio content, that would all fall under copyright. So let's say you were creating a membership and somebody logs into your membership and they can see a series of videos or downloads like PDFs, handouts, workbooks, audio files, anything like that, that all of that content would fall under copyright law in America. So then what falls under trademark? Well, with trademarks, what we would be talking about in this case would be the name of your membership. So let's say you have like a really catchy name to your membership, a catchy name of your business, your logo, your business's logo, or any like sub logos you have for products, as well as taglines or sayings that you have for your business. That kind of stuff is what we trademark. So trademarks are more for names and logos, whereas copyrights are what protects your actual content itself. So do you have to register a trademark or a copyright in order to get protection from it? So this is sort of a very lawyery answer, but technically no. So you do in America, whenever you create something that's original to you. So you write something or you film a video, right? And it's original content. You're not stealing it from anybody else. You're not mimicking someone else. Or you name your membership something and it's really unique and original and it's not anybody else's trademark. You have what's called common law protection. There's common law copyright protection and common law trademark protection. That means that the moment that you create something that's original to you, you do have some protection in it. The issue becomes an issue of enforcement. So that's what we're going to talk about next, because with enforcement, it really comes down to when we register something in our businesses, it gives us the ability to be able to actually go after this person, right, and actually sue somebody to try to shut it down. In this part of the law, this is what we call injunctive relief, which is where we go. You're not suing somebody for like millions and millions of dollars. You're suing somebody to stop doing something or to force them to do something. And so what you want to have the right to is like if somebody is like reselling something or they're reusing your content, you want to be able to sue them to stop them, and then at least get the money back that, if they've, let's say they like downloaded everything in your membership and sold it as their own, you want to be able to get at least that back. But at the very least, we just want to be able to stop them. So there are some tech safeguards that you can do as well, right? But at the end of the day, registration is really what's going to help you. So what I always say is that, like, in a business like mine, for example, it would be impossible to register every single thing that I do, right? Every Instagram post, every video on YouTube, every podcast episode, it would be way too much. And so what, at least my approach, and this is not like the right or wrong thing, but my approach is to protect your bread and butter. So your products, your content inside those products, that's the kind of stuff that we go and we register with the US Copyright Office or with the US Trademark Office, depending on which one we're talking about. But otherwise, for the day-to-day stuff, I recommend trying to explore whatever tech safeguards you can. So like on websites, for example, there are certain plugins that you can get, that will help you to like not allow people to copy and paste or to control, like right click and control C and control V and all that kind of stuff. You can disable a lot of that on your site. There are some things you can do with PDFs, to lock them, but depending on what you're using and how you're offering information, you can explore that, but it's just an idea more that I wanted to bring up. I know with videos and things, I'll make it so that like you can't download them, you can't embed them, you can't send them to other people. So that helps to at least try to stop the bleeding a little bit. Now, what then happens though if somebody steals it, right? If somebody steals it, then it's like, okay, now we go from talking about prevention to how do we react? So if you've registered the content that somebody stole, it's going to make your life a lot easier because you're going to be able to essentially get the presumption of ownership very quickly. So you wouldn't even necessarily have to go immediately to suing somebody. You could do what's called a DMCA takedown notice, which is like a digital millennium, like a basically like a online complaint essentially that you can file to take somebody's information down. Let's say they put it on their website and it was from your website. You can contact their hosting provider, you can contact Google. There are all kinds of things you can do. If somebody steals it on like a social media platform, a lot of the social media platforms have their own takedown mechanism. But if you own it, you'll be able to submit this as proof and it will make your life a lot easier. Now, the other thing that you have to be aware of, especially when it comes to selling memberships or courses, is that we have a lot of what we call customer inspiration issues, which is where because of the nature of like being able to buy your stuff when you're not around, when you're sleeping, that's kind of the goal, is that somebody can buy it who's also just trying to be inspired by it. So we see this a lot where people will say, oh, I wanted to sell a membership that's like this too. So I bought this person's because I wanted to see how they set it up, right? And that's really not the purpose, I'm sure, of your membership. And so that's something you definitely want to have very explicitly outlined in your terms of use, that this is for personal use only. It's not for people who are trying to implement it, on their own, for their own business. And you would have it there, but this is also something that we would then kind of monitor from the intellectual property perspective. Okay, so far today, we have gone over how to form your business. So we talked about the differences between LLCs and sole proprietorships, how those are just two of the many different kinds of business entity types. We talked about how with a sole proprietorship, it's super easy to get started up. It tends to be a little cheaper, but we also understand now that it offers us no legal protection for ourselves, which is really the goal of forming our business. On the flip side, an LLC does offer us some of that personal liability protection. It can be a little bit more complicated and expensive to set up depending on where you live. We also talked about the contracts that you need. So we understand that however you work with people, you need to have a contract that's professionally drafted and it's clear and consistent. And more than anything, we need to make sure that it protects your boundaries, your sanity inadvertently, and just making sure that we can kind of remove you from the day-to-day decision-making in a business. We also talked about how contracts go to like protecting boundaries and client expectations or customer expectations. So you don't have to get people saying, oh, I thought this was included, or I thought this is how it worked. It's just very clear. We also went over protecting your content. So with copyrights and trademarks, we, talked about them at a basic level. You could talk about this all day long. I'm excited to see if there are any questions about it. But really, the gist of what you need to know about protecting your content is that yes, you get some inherent protection from it, but really, if you want to be able to enforce that protection, you need to go forward with registration through the US Copyright Office or through the United States Patent and Trademark Office for trademarks. We also talked about business insurance and how it financially protects your business, because if you get sued, it's going to provide you with a lawyer and it's going to pay a judgment or settlement found against your business for anything that's covered by your policy. So that's something that's really helpful to get in place. And then last but not least, I think we touched on what the purpose is really of legal protection, that it's not necessarily about not getting sued. I don't think people are in the online space like going around getting sued left and right. It tends to be more of this day-to-day stuff that we talked about, where people are trying to be inspired by your content, or they're stealing your content, or the customer wants a refund when you said there are no refunds, things like that. So that is really what we've covered so far today. Okay, very quickly, I just wanted to let you know how I can help you. I do have DIY legal templates for what we talked about today. They're fill in the blank, instant download contracts and website policies. Every single one that we've talked about today, I offer. They take 15 minutes or less to fill out, because every single one comes with a how-to video tutorial where I teach you how to fill in the blanks along with my assistants, and you can send them out to a client or post them into your membership or whatever you need to do very quickly. The only other thing that I offer is the Ultimate Bundle. It's my signature program that gives you over 10 essential contracts and policies. You get support from me in a private community, and then over 35 on-demand trainings on how to legally grow and run your business. Everything from how to form the LLC, to getting business insurance, to protecting your content, working with clients. And I do have a special training in there on memberships as well. Okay, so this was just a little bit about what's inside of the Ultimate Bundle, but I'm happy to go jump into taking questions. And of course, you can let me know if this is something that you're interested in, if you think it's right for you. And then I think I have a Q&A slide right here. Oh,
There
and then,
we go.
sorry, I was just letting everybody know that if you want to reach out and get in touch, I'm most active on Instagram. I'm at Sam Vanderwielen. My site is samvanderwielen.com, which is where you can reach out to me. But you can also, we have hundreds of blog posts and free podcast episodes there, lots and lots of free resources there for you to legally protect your business, as well as shopping my legal templates. And I do have my On Your Terms podcast, where every single Monday I post a new episode with legal tips or behind the scenes business building advice.
Sam, this is fantastic. Let me just put up some kudos on the screen. It was nice. Some people really appreciated the things you shared here today. So thank you for sharing.
Of course, thank you.
And yes, please do add your questions now, because we're like 30 seconds delayed, so it takes a minute for them to come up back to us. So please add your questions now. There's a couple in the queue. So I think I want to start with this one from Bruce. How do you register every training video topic that you post on your site? And let me rephrase this from what I know. When you do copyright stuff, you can submit like batches, if I'm correct. So like you can say, everything in this course I want to copyright, but then I guess you have to wait till the end of the course, or you can do it one by one, but isn't there like a filing fee for each one? Tell me where I'm wrong here.
No, yeah, you're not wrong, but I think it's more of an efficiency thing. So at least like the way that I've always done this is that, like the Ultimate Bundle, for example, has like probably 50 something videos in it. So once I finished all of those, we submitted all of them in a batch for efficiency's sake, but I also wanted them all to get approved at once. And so you can do it like that. With copyright stuff, you kind of submit them in like categories. So let's say, for example, in the Ultimate Bundle, I have a series of videos, and we submitted those because they're all videos. And then I submitted all of my legal templates because they're, like written contract documents essentially. So I submitted those all as a batch as well. So if you have a membership where you have videos and you have handouts or something like that, I would probably submit like all of your videos and then submit all of your handouts. If you have if you have a website like I do, where it has a lot of content on the website itself. That's where I was saying that I just don't think it's practical. Like,
Mhm.
again, lawyer Sam has to tell you that yes, to enforce this stuff, yes, you would have to send it all off and register it. I just don't think that's practical. One thing, I guess, like a little bit of a workaround would be that you could post videos as YouTube videos, and then if you like integrate them into your site in a blog post, then at least you're covered by YouTube's intellectual property practices,
Sure.
where they would take it down if somebody stole part of the video or something like that, or at least you would hope they would. But if it was for a membership or a course, I would submit them for registration. Yeah.
Perfect. And then just again, what stuff can you register with copyright? Like it's anything like artistic, right? So it's writing, video, podcasts, photos, it's all that,
Yep.
right?
It's all literary works, which that's like a really broad definition for US Copyright Office, but literary works include books, ebooks, poems, anything that would be in a digital form. If anyone's more talented than me and they can write poems, or anything that would be in a digital form, like a PDF, an ebook, any handout, anything like that. I mean, even small something could be submitted for copyright, as well as video and audio. So the actual video content itself, or yeah, if you had podcasts, or I know like a lot of people now are doing audio files for a membership or something like that, that could all be submitted for copyright protection.
And related here, how expensive is it? Is there is a yeah, I forget what it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's $50 per application, but then the thing that is a little tricky is whether you can submit one application when they're digital, and you can usually submit a bunch of things under one
Yeah.
application. That's kind of why Patrick and I were saying it makes a bit more sense, but also for your sanity, because you can just get it done all at one time. And then it's like for every additional application. For trademarks, the last time I did one, it was 225, and I feel like it went up maybe to 250 to 275. They always give you a break if you'll do a digital registration versus sending in any sort of paper application, or like for the US office, they give you a break if you will submit or upload your content versus having to send it into them. And so you can check that out. And with trademarks, it's by class. So you don't get a lot of people are under the wrong impression that when you submit a trademark, you get protection for like any use of that term across the entire board. But really, it's just for that class in particular, and you would have to register for all these different classes. So that's they charge per class.
Sorry, what does the class mean? I don't get that.
Yeah, so like let's say you had a membership, for example, and let's say you had a fitness membership. And so you had a really cool name for your, yeah, obviously Patrick has a fitness membership. And so so if you had like a really cool name for it, we would submit a trademark application for a fitness membership site. And there's a class, I think it might be 41, but don't quote me on it. There's a whole bunch of numbers. But essentially what that does is say that you have protection for this name or this phrase in being used for a membership site that talks about fitness, blah blah blah. You wouldn't be able to protect like a seamstress opening a store in Colorado, like it's
Yeah.
not like people think that if when you register something for a trademark, you can block
Yep.
everybody from using it in any way. But you really have to be pretty narrow in your submissions. So if you have a podcast, for example, and you want to get the name of your podcast trademark, you can only trademark your podcast for the type of content that you talk about. So mine would be for like business and legal things, or like consulting and business
Yep.
legal. It would be that stuff. I wouldn't be able to necessarily block somebody who talks about like farming practices or something like that.
Yep. It's scoped. Got it.
Yep, exactly.
Um, so relating to trademarks here, so if someone does register a trademark for like their
Mm.
logo, but then let's say here there's a Pride Month version of the logo. I guess could someone steal that and then use that? Do you have to protect, alternate versions of logos or anything like that?
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy, Emily, but when you register a trademark, you actually have to give, and I'm sure you did this when you created the first one or when you submitted it, you actually have to give very specific detail when you submit the trademark application as to what exactly, like, Like, if you ever look up the description of targets, for example, it's like a bullseye with, I forget if there's 2 or 3 circles, but it's like 2 or 3 concentric circles with red, with white in between. Like, you really have, I used to have to write these applications, and they're very painstakingly boring. So the reason I'm mentioning that is because the reason they make you do that is because you only get protection for the exact way that you submitted it, the exact way you described it. So if you create any variations or sub logos, those would have to be submitted for protection as well. Yeah,
Got it. Got it. I mean, if
that's a
this is
really good
like
question.
the Google, like they used to do the Google Doodles, I don't think they still do it, where they have like a different one
Yeah.
every day. You're probably not registering all those. There's probably just you
Mm.
live with the fact that someone might steal one of your alternate logos.
Because with them, I imagine with Google, they're first of all licensing usually the images or the likeness of other people. Because a lot of times they will do that for like a holiday or to celebrate a celebrity. So they wouldn't be able to trademark that anyway because
Hmm.
you couldn't trademark the word Google with like Martin Luther King's face on it or something like that
Okay.
because that violates his intellectual property rights.
Okay.
And so that would be very interesting. But so I'm imagining what they do is some sort of like licensing artwork agreement where they're allowed to do that. But also, Patrick, they're not putting that on any. I mean, yes, it's on their website, but like, probably more with like Emily's question, if you're putting that logo then on like goods, if you were selling mugs, for example, and then you had like your logo with like a Pride logo, and you were selling mugs or something like this, that you're putting it out into commerce. So that's when I would be concerned about it, is if you're creating a
Got
variant type of logo that you're actually using in commerce. Yeah.
right. If it's swag or something, got it. Or you're selling it.
Exactly. Yeah, using
Got it.
something to sell it on, then it's a problem, yeah. I mean,
So
only if
another
you
one.
want it to be, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Another relating to this. I mean, is this first of all, is this trademarking is something is that covered in your legal templates, or is that something that you have to
I
go
teach
outside for?
people how to do it. Yeah, so I teach people how to do it because it's actually not very hard, and it's very expensive through attorneys. So to answer your question, Anne, it's a very good question. You can go to a local to you intellectual property attorney, and what I would do is ask them how much they charge. Most do this as a flat fee. I would not work with anybody who won't do this for a flat fee. What that means is that they'll give you an upfront quote on how much they're going to charge you. You don't want to work with an attorney who tells you it's hourly and then you're like, you have no idea how much it's going to cost. So, sometimes this will be like $2,000 to $5,000. I mean, people get quotes all over the place. That's certainly a viable option, and I think it's great, and it's a great way to get it off your plate. I have a lawyer for my own business. I just sent one to a lawyer because I just didn't feel like doing it, and I was too busy. So it's okay. It's, if you don't want to do it, that's completely okay. I also think that you're capable of doing it. So for those who feel like doing it, or sometimes people just want to submit like additional ones for fun or experiment with stuff. Maybe after you get like your initial trademark for your business name or something like that, a lot of people can't financially, swing in again. So I just teach people how to do it in case that comes up.
All right, so I've got one here, and I'm going to try to answer it, and then you can tell me how wrong I am.
This is
So,
a fun game.
my membership site is based out of Ohio. How would I go about actually registering? I'm going to guess you go to your Secretary of State's website and you follow so the Ohio Secretary of State, and that's how you find all the information you need to register your business in whatever state you're in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm assuming, Bruce, that you're also located in Ohio, not just your site. But if that's true, then that means yes, that you would register in Ohio. I mean, like I mentioned in the beginning, you technically have other options. They're just not options I would typically recommend or explore because you have to pay taxes in Ohio because you're based in Ohio. And if your business is registered in Ohio or is being run out of Ohio, it has to be registered there. So I just see it as a lot of like hubbub for nothing. But personally, but yes, you would register in Ohio. And I think maybe what's behind part of Bruce's question is the fact that like you can register your business where you're located, but you can do business with people anywhere online. So, if you are, Bruce, if you're in Ohio and that's where you're running the membership site out of, but you have clients purchasing your membership from California and Florida, that's completely okay. It's usually more physical businesses like Target, if I keep using this as an example, but Target, for example, they have stores in all of these different states. They have to register there. They have employees in all these states, this kind of stuff. I have employees that are in different states, so I've had to register as what's called a foreign entity in all these different states in America because that's where the employees are. That's a different story, but you're allowed to have customers, digital customers wherever.
Cool. Another one on location here. So Emily registered her nonprofit in Connecticut. I think that's what CT is, hopefully. But I'm its
Mhm.
executive officer in Colorado. Should I
Mm.
move the registration or be registered in both?
Yeah, Emily, so my first question for you would be like whether or not like maybe you registered in Connecticut because you used to be located in Connecticut. So sometimes what might be behind your question, Emily, you can tell me if I'm wrong, might be that you moved. And so this happened a lot, over the last several years, especially with COVID. And so just as a little quick, like 30-second lesson for anybody about moving when you have a business, if you've registered your business in one place, but then you move to another state, you essentially have two options. You can leave your business in your original state, kind of like what Emily's, I think, suggesting here, and you could go to your new state and you can register as what's called a foreign entity in your new state. So let's say in Emily's case, she would have to register as what's called a foreign entity in Colorado. The only time that really ever makes sense is if you have like headquarters back in that original state, or if you're splitting time. Some people are like, if you're bi-coastal or something, or you have family there, or Colorado's temporary and you're going to go back to Connecticut. That's kind of the only time that makes sense because you're going to end up in a dual tax situation. What the second option is the one that people make when they're moving a bit more permanently. And I always say permanently very loosely because I understand nothing, in life is like permanent, but you don't have an immediate plan to go back to Connecticut. Then what you would do is dissolve the initial business in the first state, like Connecticut, and you would register a new entity in your new state in Colorado. So those are kind of your two options. So you could leave it in Connecticut and register as a foreign entity in Colorado, or you could dissolve in Connecticut and register new in Colorado. I personally probably wouldn't leave both unless there was some sort of tax benefit to you, which you could ask your accountant about, or if you have plans to go back to Connecticut or spend just as much time there. Yeah.
So quite a follow up for me. I've never
Mhm.
really thought about dissolving a business before. If you do that, do you get to like keep your business bank account and just transfer, your EIN numbers or what or something like that?
Yeah, so dissolving a business is actually really easy. It's usually just an online form in whatever state. So if you need to do this, usually just Google like state dissolve LLC or something, and it's just a form that you'll fill out, and of course they charge you a fee on the way out too. And then with your business bank account, what you would do is like let's say in Emily's case, she went to Colorado, registered as the same thing. You'd have to go back to your business bank account and update your information because essentially now you're going to have like a new certificate of formation. I don't think you have to change your EIN number. There's actually this really great, I can send you afterwards, Patrick, the PDF for this. The IRS has a really helpful tool to tell you whether or not you need a new EIN number in like what scenario. In
Hmm.
many scenarios, you don't actually need a new one, and you can use the old one. So I'm pretty sure that changing like entity location, which is essentially what you'd be doing in this case, is not a need
Oh,
for a new EIN, which is very convenient because you don't have to go through and change everything.
awesome. Good to know. All right, so I've got one
Yeah.
more easy. So if you have time, Sam, I've got one more, I think, easy
Oh,
one,
yeah.
and then two ones that might be a little complex. So let's do the easy one first.
I'll rev my brain up.
So yes, so I think we talked about three policies on the website. It was the privacy policy, the terms of use, and then I think the website disclaimer. So what should go in that website disclaimer?
Yes. So, website disclaimer is what disclaims liability for people who are visiting your site or consuming your content. So, what's like behind this question, or what's behind really a website disclaimer, is the idea that in America, you can get sued for stuff that you say or do without getting paid for it. So, I think sometimes people think like they can only get sued by a customer or a client of some sort, like that it has to be like a relationship gone bad or a product gone bad. But in America, it can be as simple as like, "Hey, I read your book and it did something bad to me," or "Hey, I read this like blog post on your site and I had some bad experience." And so that's very rare, obviously, and it's like few and far between, all that kind of stuff. I don't want people to worry about it, but that's just the reason that we put up a website disclaimer. Because in a website disclaimer, we're saying essentially who we are, what we do, and what we don't do. And so for you, this might be like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a financial advisor, or like you should make sure you have a therapist, like people are offering like self-care memberships or something like this. So we're typically telling people like that you have to proceed at your own risk, and that you need to implement this information with some of their own responsibility, in trying to make sure that we're not getting blamed for the experiences that they have while consuming our content or from using our site. So the other thing would be like, if in your content, if you refer to third party links or products, we don't want you getting blamed for what happens over there. So the example I always give is like, let's say I link to a hair straightener, and you go and you buy this hair straightener because I recommended it and it singes all your hair off. I don't want you coming and blaming me for having recommended the hair
Mhm.
straightener. So that's kind of what we're covering in a website disclaimer.
Got it. Good. I didn't know. I don't think I knew that just, if I have a blog post, I mean, I guess it makes sense. If I have a blog post that says, eat Tide Pods, and then somebody eats a Tide Pod, I would be responsible. That makes sense. That's a
Yeah.
crazy example, but it makes sense when I think about it that way. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just something that, I some people will get freaked out by this and they don't want to then say anything or do anything. I would say that it's more something to have in your consciousness that, this is something that I always have in my mind when I'm teaching, or that I'm giving caveats, or I'm saying like this might not be
Yeah.
right for everyone, or you should
Yep.
check with your accountant, or you got to check in
Yep.
your state. It's not the same for you. So I think just learning to get more comfortable, it's something that just becomes part of our vernacular as online
Yep.
people. And so that's what I would recommend, is like having that on there is kind of the formal part, and then hopefully you've seen today some examples of working in some of the informal stuff.
Got it. So, all right. All right. So I think we got two more here. This one's a two-parter.
Yeah.
So, buckle up. So, and speaking of talking to your accountant, so here's the
Hmm.
first part. We offer retail services where every transaction is taxable. Do we need to collect tax amount from their customer, then forward the tax money to the retailer? Part two. Also, the retailers are our company customer and we're responsible to pay the tax. Whew. So do we only charge retailers with that tax amount? So let me try to I think the way I'm thinking about this is they're a company who has other people working for them, and then people, it's like their website maybe. So I'm the company, I own the website, people, other retailers are on my website, and people are
Mm,
buying their products. How
mm.
does that whole tax thing work when someone might be buying someone else's products on your website? Let me know if this is too complicated.
No, almost like an Amazon, like Amazon has retailers selling things on their site kind of thing.
That's how I
Yeah.
read this. Yes,
Hmm.
it's like a marketplace.
Hmm.
I'm not sure exactly, but that's how I read it.
That's interesting. So I would imagine this would be really dependent on how you have it set up for collecting payments from your retailers, because I'm assuming that your retailers themselves are processing payments directly, which then means that, like, let's say they are selling, they're selling socks, and the socks are taxable. And so I would say at the very least, you need to have technology on your site that allows your retailers to be able to collect sales tax, and that they would be required to pay it, but that they it would be their responsibility. So you would have to have that built into your own terms with your retailers. And then I would say on your end, if it's taxable for you to like charge people for to sell stuff on your site, then yes, you need to be doing the same thing. You need to be reporting it. Just in general, I mean, this is probably too complicated for somebody like me, and so I would say like you would definitely want to talk to your own lawyer. But the the gist of what I wanted to mention in general is that like you need to check whether any of your products or services, typically services are not sales tax, there's usually sales tax exempt, but you need to check whether any of your stuff counts. One thing
Mhm.
is what's called taxjar.com is a helpful tool to be able to see if your stuff qualifies for sales tax, and that you can like click by state or whatever. But the thing that people don't know about sales tax, like you have to be collecting it and passing it through to the state consistently. So, and then that doesn't count as revenue or something for you. It comes off like, as a deduction. But the point is you are responsible for knowing whether or not your stuff applies, and then paying it to the state. And if you're doing something in business where somebody else has to be collecting this, it's almost like hiring an independent contractor. Like when you hire an independent contractor for your business, you need to have a contract in place with them that not only says they're a contractor and not an employee, but part of that is making sure you have it in writing that they know they're responsible for paying their taxes, and you're not paying their employment taxes on their behalf, and that you don't want any sort of liability for that. It's very similar here. Like if you were having people sell stuff on your site, I'd want something in place that says like you understand you have to collect, sales tax, and you're responsible for submitting that to your state, not us, unless you offer that as a service or something. Like WooCommerce has like a, additional plugin or whatever that you can do through WooCommerce to do that, but you're still responsible for submitting it. WooCommerce isn't. So, the like plugin you can get can help you to like transfer this money, but that's really it. Yeah.
I
So
think
hopefully
we
that was
got it.
helpful, Beatrice.
So
Yeah.
she says, so I think we got it. Great. All right. So I think this is the last one. I think we've covered all the rest. There's a couple duplicates, but I think we got all the rest. So last one, I think this is more of like someone else's terms of service, but if a membership plan allows someone to sell digital products to members, can Apple or Google, like the iOS store and the Android store, claim a percent of that member's revenue if the membership network is accessed by a web app versus the website? So, right. So if you make an Apple or Google app and someone buys through the app, they take usually 30% of that transaction for digital services, not products. So I really think this is probably based on their terms of service, less general law question. But any advice here? Oof.
Yeah. So I'm trying to see, like, my arrow is saying that they have a membership plan that allows a member to sell digital products to other members. Like,
I
I'm trying to
guess.
think, can you think of an example of how you'd have this set up, or maybe my arrow can explain to us, like, how an example of how this is set up? Because I think I can answer this. I just want to make sure I have it right.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
just
there's a
rereading
little
your
delay,
question,
so
Mara,
we'll
sorry.
see if they
Okay,
add
I'll
a
see it. I'll
little
reread it for a
clarification.
second as this fly is bothering me. I'm in a 200-year-old farmhouse in upstate Vermont, so there are flies here. It's like, this fly is driving me nuts. Apple claim a percent of that member's revenue.
These are coaching services, she says.
Coaching services that you're selling through an app. The membership plan allows a member to sell digital products to members. That's where I'm getting confused.
And apparently they sell videos. Coaching services via videos. So maybe it's even like you can like send, I don't know if it's like one-on-one videos, like personal videos, or if maybe it's just a
Oh,
video that everyone gets to see. But
I mean,
I get maybe
Apple
it's a
can do
health
whatever they
network.
want.
Yeah, it's a health network, and I make a video, and then other people can sell that to other people. If it's via the app, I would guess yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Apple could do whatever it wants. So in terms of that, you would want
Yes.
to check their terms of service. I would also say that I think what you're talking about too, Mara, is like essentially a licensing agreement. It's actually a template that I just created because you want to be able to control how other people, if what I think you're saying is that you're allowing other people to resell your stuff and as their own, or kind of be almost like little foot soldiers for selling it, then you would want to make sure you have a licensing agreement in place.
And I'll just add a
Yeah.
comment from Jason here that this is probably recently changed, and there was some stuff between Hey, which is an email client, and Apple. So anyways, there's some of Jason's advice, but obviously
Cool.
you have to figure out what Apple, what it's their platform, or Google, it's their platform. So you need to figure it out with them.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I think this basically covers it all. So let me add, oops, I just kicked Sam off the screen. Let me put Sam back on the screen.
I'm back. Thanks, Jason. That's helpful.
There we go. Figured it out.
We're back.
So Sam, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. As you can see, every time I do, there's a couple topics that I love covering. One of them is legal stuff, and there's always questions with legal stuff and sometimes they're really broad of, website disclaimers, and sometimes they're very specific. So thank you for coming on here and giving a much more expert opinion than I could give.
No, well, I'm just appreciative that you had me. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for all the great questions. Every question was actually really, really good. And I would love to help anybody. If you need anything, you can always reach out to me on Instagram at Sam Vanderwielen. I hope you'll come over and listen to my podcast on your terms. But I'm just so appreciative for you having me here today.
Awesome. And lastly, there will be a recording on the Paid Memberships Pro website. So if you want to rewatch anything, it will be on the Paid Memberships website as soon as this is done. And in a week or two, we'll have sort of an outline of what we covered with links and all sorts of extras. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day.
Thanks, Patrick. See you.